Jeremy, thank you very much for joining us today. I really appreciate you taking the time. I have to say, of all the interviews that we've done recently, with CEOs of banks and whatnot, this is the one that I've been really looking forward to do because, again, it's one of the things that I use so frequent. So thank you very much for making the time.
You're welcome. It's good to be here.
Indeed. So first thing, and obviously we probably should ask this, given that I'm a sample size of one and I feel you're completely accountable of this, when are we going to get the guy with the shaved head and the beard emoji? Because clearly that's holding back my communications.
That would be amazing for you, right? There's a beard on the draft list for this year. Baldness, I don't know.
Well,
we'll see, maybe next year.
Well, I live in hope, which is good. So maybe if we start for our audience, if we start with a bit of a sort of a definition. So obviously there's sort of emoticons and emojis and stickers and, the plain old GIF in terms of where we're going. What's the sort of difference between these things?
I mean, most people use it sort of interchangeably, really. Emoticon, normally people refer to as sort of the text emoticon, the colon and the bracket. Emoji, technically, in Japan it just means it's a picture letter, a picture amongst different letters, but really it just means that it's something we can insert into text in a color image that works on any app, any platform, and that makes it different than stickers, which only work on one platform at a time. I can't just send you a sticker from over email, or I can't put a sticker in the email subject or in my calendar, whereas emojis, you can put them anywhere that text is supported.
Great. Well, it's, it's a, like you say, a catch-all that people use emojis for. But like you say, it's amazing the sort of diversity that comes within that. And it's really sort of big business now as well, isn't it? So it was it 2015 that the Oxford English Dictionary said that an emoji was the word of the year? Yeah. I think it was was it the crying, laughing one, I believe?
Yeah, the face with tears of joy.
Indeed.
The name.
And you were recently on BBC News talking about emoji. So clearly a huge business going forwards, right?
I mean, the funny thing about emoji is there's no one owns it. So by default, I sometimes stand in as a sort of emoji spokesperson because Unicode are there standardizing it, and different companies, people often think of an emoji, they often think of Apple's ones, potentially. But Apple's not going to be out there saying, oh, here's our new poo emoji, So, yeah, I mean, everyone uses them and people want to know more. So BBC, any media, that's where I often spend a lot of my days now.
Awesome. And Emojipedia, tell us a little bit more about that.
So it started off as a directory of here's every emoji, here's the official name, every emoji has an official name, and a little bit about maybe where it came from, especially the Japanese ones people find pretty weird. But now, a lot of the reason people use it, it has what it looks like on every platform. So one emoji might look different on an iPhone or an Android phone. So it's really we're aiming to make it a canonical resource where you can find out anything about which emojis there are and which ones are coming up.
It's interesting, the point around translation. There are real subtle differences in some instances, aren't they? And actually the translation, if you're sending something from an Apple device to a Samsung device in terms of what you intend somebody to see and what they see. I know I've been caught out a few times in Slack, definitely, in terms of what I thought it would be and what it turned out to be. But yeah, it's that translation is interesting, right? I
mean, especially the human ones, when you look at someone's face, you really notice if they're smiling or if they're fake smiling. So an emoji where the pixels are slightly different, you really go, oh, that's a different emotion. And yeah. You mentioned Samsung, but the eye roll emoji, I don't know whether you've seen what sort of looks like an eye roll on an iPhone.
I've been sent that a lot. I know what it looks like. Yeah.
But on a Samsung phone, it looks really happy for some reason, that it doesn't look like a disdainful look. So that's a genuinely a big gap where I've seen people say, look, my girlfriend nearly broke up with me because I sent this one sort of saying, oh, what's for dinner? And thought it was a happy sideward glance. And at the other end, it came through as, oh, what's for dinner?
Wow, relationships broken over emoji usage. It's an interesting.
Yeah.
And you are part of the consortium that actually gets together to discuss this. So the Unicode consortium. So what is it, and tell us a little bit more about who's involved.
So Unicode has a background where really they're there to make sure that text works from one country to another. Back in the 90s, if I wrote you a letter and you were in Japan on a Japanese computer, it wouldn't necessarily look right. So Unicode have been around doing the real trudge work for years, making sure text works. But because emojis are treated as text, they come under Unicode's authority to approve new ones.
So those meetings have just got far more interesting then, huh?
So much more interesting. Well, I wasn't involved in Unicode before they started getting involved in Emoji, but absolutely. Now, it's only one committee. There's the Unicode emoji subcommittee, which I'm on. They've still got all their other committees dealing with every other language in the world, but I think we're on the most fun committee anyway.
Yeah. And who's part of that?
It's Apple, it's Google, it's Microsoft. I mean, especially the emoji side of it. It's anyone that has an interest in emoji. It's Twitter, that all these companies, they need a seat at the table, right? If they don't want an emoji to exist, or if they do want one, they need to speak on behalf of their users to say, hey, our users really want emojis to be more representative, or our users want this particular emoji a dumpling because they're in an Asian country and it's not covered. So that's what they bring.
Yeah. Well, and definitely we've seen that recently, haven't we? We've seen, emojis were quite limited to start with in terms of their usage. There was, 40 or 50 to start with in terms of what went out there?
200 to begin with.
Wow.
Yeah.
But how many are there now?
It's about 2,200 or so.
Wow. Because we've seen real wholesale changes in, I guess, how women are portrayed through emojis, which you get into real sort of interesting diversity conversations, don't you?
I mean, the real issue, as you say, with women, that there was an issue when Apple first drew a lot of their images. They based it off this one Japanese carrier that, for whatever reason, they made sort of the guys with jobs that were men, and the people getting their hair cut or getting massages were women. And I guess the issue is always going to be that there's only one of each at the time. So let's say you switch it, is that necessarily better? In the end, Unicode and therefore Apple and Google went with, I guess, the most complete option, just have one of everything. Have a woman and a man doing everything. So now you've got the woman and the man doing this, you've got the woman and the man police officer or running, and I don't know if there is another answer really. If you pick and choose, you're always going to be wrong somewhere. So that's why we've got 2,000. So we've got a skin tone for everyone, there's a gender for everyone. Some of this year there's inclusive genders being looked at as well, because now there's male and female, but if you don't strongly identify as one or the other, you're also forced to pick. So
yeah.
The answer has so far been just add more.
Yeah. Well, it made sense having just everybody having, Simpsons-esque yellow skin to start with. But now, like you say, you've got kind of full range of skin tones to self-select into when you're using it.
Yeah. I mean, what happened before the yellow ones is a lot of them were actually genuinely white years ago. That they're default yellow now, but a lot of them, the baby and the man and the woman, they were actually Caucasian. And I guess we could have just made it yellow. That was definitely, and not bother with the skin tones at all. That would have been one option, but there's also, you find a lot of people with darker skin tones don't find yellow representative either. That if you have a family full of yellow people, they just think, oh, that's basically white. Like, this doesn't represent my family.
Yeah.
So again, more options, everyone's got a choice.
And there's always new options coming through, right? So what is it, like 60-ish new emojis that are going to be accepted?
Yeah, it's about 60 to 70 a year, roughly. There's no hard and fast rule. The draft list for this year, it's a couple of hundred, but if you chuck out the skin tones and the gender, the draft is about 70 or so.
And what's the sort of favourite? Obviously, the guy with the shaved head and a beard is the favourite coming through, but what's in the list there that really sort of stands out for you?
That stands out for me, I mean, there's a swearing face. It's got sort of a box over the mouth.
That sounds like it's going to get a lot of usage. Yeah?
What else is there? There is the guy with the beard, but he might be bald. It doesn't say what his hairstyle looks like.
Again, I live in hope, yeah.
There's a woman with a headscarf or a hijab.
Okay.
There's a one with stars on the eyes, and a new sort of one I'm looking forward to is this one with the monocle. It used to exist on some platforms, or it was just wearing a monocle. It's sort of a posh.
Sounds like a fancy
Yeah,
right,
yeah.
Nice.
But I've seen different mock-ups for that, and some of them smile, and some of them kind of have a pout, and it changes the meaning again.
Indeed. I noticed that there's a couple of Dinosaur ones in there, right? Like, as somebody who works in banking a lot, that's going to come in really, really handy for conveying a point in terms of, where people might be stuck or not.
We got proposals. We had one proposal for a dinosaur emoji, and there were people very upset that said, you can't have a dinosaur emoji because it's like having an animal emoji. Like, it means nothing. There's so many animals, and how would you pick one? And then there was another proposal for 24 dinosaurs. And in the end, we got 2 on the draft list. Because, I mean, you've got to draw the line somewhere. Some people feel like you should include everything, and others think, oh, what's the easiest thing we can do? But we've got a T-Rex and a sauropod, which is sort of a long neck dinosaur, on the list.
That T-Rex is definitely getting a lot of usage from my perspective. But I guess that point is is really true though. Like, where do you stop with this? Because I guess a point of just basic usability, basic usage is findability. So everybody has that 4x4 grid or an 8x8 grid of the ones that they use most frequently. And I was having quite a lot of fun last night, really discovering what in the team of 11FS most people use, which it was very telling, I have to say, in terms of what people's main one that we're using. But where do you stop?
Yeah, I mean, I guess we don't know the answer really. So far, the low-hanging fruit gets picked every year, and sort of the most requested and the most omitted ones. But yeah, there's a real question. There's a user interface challenge. There's a practical challenge. Does anyone care? If you had 1 million, does that mean anything anymore? Does each one mean anything individually? So I think there is a limit somewhere, but I don't think we know where it is. So we keep progressing and we'll see.
What about you then? Is the t-shirt a bit of a giveaway of what your most used emoji is, or what's the one you use most frequently?
I like the monkey with the cheeky monkey with the hands over the face. I find the monkeys are a bit more expressive than the yellow smileys, so that one's quite fun. Especially if you're making a mean joke in particular that maybe you chicken out at the last minute, that it's funnier without it, but you don't want to risk that person genuinely being offended. So being able to sort of drive something home, but then put the cheeky monkey at the end is quite helpful.
And do you see, brands using that sort of mechanic? Because, like you say, you can back yourselves, particularly in something like Twitter, shall we say, where you've got 140 characters. You can actually convey so much emotion or so much cheekiness off the back of quite a specific statement with a monkey emoji. So how are you seeing brands kind of really embrace this? Yeah,
brands are right on board. There's the practical concern. Email subjects and tweets have a limit to how much you can fit in. No matter what you say, it jumps out at you a bit more. If there's an emoji in there, even if the message could be the worst, it could be the worst use of emoji, but it still grabs your attention a little. So brands, they want to be our friends, and it works well for some brands that genuinely are sort of a bit cool, and it doesn't work for other brands. I know, when Hillary Clinton last year said her campaign team, seems trite now given what else is going on, but when her campaign team put out describe how you feel about your student debt in 3 emojis, you get sort of those cringeworthy, attempts at trying to be up with the kids, which kind of fall flat.
Well, yeah, if it's too forced, it can definitely sort of feel a little bit like you say, trying to get down with the kids to a certain degree, can't it?
Yeah, I mean, I can see the temptation, and I think a lot of brands use it pretty well, to be honest. That it's fun, it's quick, it conveys more than you can otherwise convey. But yeah, there's always a risk of, if you have a very staid or wooden brand, trying to dive in there like anything just doesn't really work.
And I guess one brand who's sort of been in the news recently for using them for a slightly different reason is Facebook. Facebook have obviously broadened what they allow people to do to react to what other individuals are doing. So as opposed to just the uptick, now you've got, is it 5 different options in terms of what you can do?
You got the like, the love, there's an upset one, which
Angry,
is quite good.
Yeah. Sad face, right?
Yeah, there was going to be what was there going to be? There was going to be another one that they thought they'd put in there, but they seemed to drop it at the last second.
I think they're looking at introducing a downward tick, aren't they?
Yeah.
But I think they removed that one at one point.
Well, they've always talked about they don't want to make it a negative place, and it is hard if one of the reactions, imagine if everything you post on Facebook, if everyone's just thumbs downing it, are you going to keep posting things?
Well, you're going to need some new friends, I think that's the thing.
Or that too, yeah.
But I guess the thing that they are doing is allowing people to almost like self-select into like a mental state, right? Very easily, I guess, Facebook can get a kind of a sentiment view of, tens of millions of people across their network of really, are they happy, are they sad, are they angry? And actually not only how they are, but how the people who perceive them within their network react to them. So to your point, if the sad guy who's always posting, cat pictures is only getting negativity from his friends, then, Facebook arguably could build a understanding of the hierarchy within social networks, right?
Yeah, I mean, they've actually said recently that if you vote for something with a heart instead of a like, that must be more important to users, so they'll spread that to more of your friends. And whereas if you like it, they go, no, we'll distribute it a bit more. So they're already right on board with that a love heart means straight to the top, and a like means, give it a little bump. You need twice as many likes, I think, to get as much exposure as one love.
Wow. It's interesting now. I think I might be a little bit more sort of, selective on who I give those hearts to now, just in case. It's, you don't want it to be like a give me more content, that.
Right, yeah, you got to watch what you do. If you accidentally start, you thought you were giving a generous love heart because you thought, oh, well, that's nice, you're just going to get a wave of that non-stop now. This sentiment analysis is really helpful, that Facebook can jump on there and they know what you think, as long as you're being honest, that is.
One of the things in, I guess, within fintech and banking that's becoming a little bit more sort of prevalent is things like instant messaging, things like chatbot interfaces. I guess it's going to be really interesting when we start seeing, bots using emojis to actually interact with humans, trying to convey human-like warmth, but doing it when it's a completely automated interface. That's going to be quite, like, at what point do we start getting the machines rocking up to the Unicode, conferences and actually sort of, talking about what they'd like to convey in terms of emotions? That's going to be very interesting, isn't it?
I mean, yeah, chat interfaces are perfect for emoji. That I know the Quartz News app is very good at using that. They'll often put an emoji there as like the read more prompt. I guess the real question is, can we tag them all appropriately to always get the right answer? The bots could definitely use emojis if there was an understanding of what they each mean, but they're so nuanced that someone needs to be there implying the meaning to say that, yes, this one is a smile, but it's not a very good smile. It's the pathetic little smile that doesn't really convey happiness. So I think you've got to be very careful, whoever puts them in, to make sure that you're actually getting the right sentiment that you want.
And do you know what? That's a really good point. I think I use them way more efficiently in something like Slack, where there's an index, than I do when I'm doing it on my iPhone. There's, I guess, to your point, the meaning of them is in the intent of the user rather than necessarily how you receive it, isn't it? So I imagine there must have been a lot of miscommunication, shall we say, with various different things, people sending them thinking they meant one thing and it turns out they mean another.
Yeah, I mean, any of the ones that look different, there's one of the more popular ones is the hugging emoji that looks nothing like a hug. It's one that looks like jazz hands.
I just thought that was jazz hands.
Yeah, and that's how I use it too. It looks like an excited face.
Well, and it's interesting, like the high five one looks like praying to a certain degree in terms of doing it. Until you know what that is, I just thought I had really religious friends for quite a long time, but hey.
That one meant to be please or thank you in Japan, not a high five or praying.
Exactly.
So use it however you want to use it, I guess. Yeah. What Unicode would say is that it's about what it looks like. That maybe this is the intention, maybe this is why it was originally encoded, but if it looks like this, you can use it for praying. You can use it for please or thank you. You can use it to mean whatever you want that gesture to mean, because gestures, we like to think of them as universal, but they're not really.
Indeed. And there's been actually some, usually the text can give you the inference of what people are looking for. But there's been some really interesting projects of people solely using emojis, right? We've seen people translate, was it Moby Dick?
Yeah, Emoji Dick.
So they translated the entirety of Moby Dick into emojis, right? That must have been, I'm going to go and find that. That sounds like it's an amazing experience to consume that,
What's fun though is if you didn't know the story, it would be indecipherable. That emojis are great for context and they're fun for things like this sort of a novelty act, or if you guess the movie based on this emoji, or here's Moby Dick written in emojis. But if you had never read that book and I asked you to read it and come away and tell me what it was about, I think there's 0% chance that you could tell me what it actually meant. So there's clear boundaries as to how useful emoji can be in this sort of long form sense anyway.
So garnish to text rather than the sort of main meal themselves then, yeah?
Yeah. Context, bit of flavour, bit of spice on the end.
Okay, sounds good. So you work out of London, so you're in the Google campus here in London.
Yes.
What brings you to, I guess, doing this out of London rather than, obviously in the States, emojis are huge. Yeah. Out in China, emojis are huge. Yeah. So what means you're doing this out of the UK?
I mean, honestly, because it's where I already am for the most part, but realistically, the UK is a great time zone for world news that we sort of wake up, and if we're publishing anything, London's perfect to get a nice little sleep in, and then you get something to put out there, and then the east coast of the US wakes up, and then the west coast. Even though emoji is so universal, we've got a very English-speaking audience, because right now, at least, the site is only in English, so it's a pretty good time zone to be sort of near Europe and then across the US, and then Australia gets the short end of the stick, where they get all your content in the morning. Which
Indeed. Well, at least they've got lots of good things to wake up to in the morning, right?
They get all the good content. But honestly, it's also quite helpful being in a place where everybody is. You know, there's that. I don't think you realize until you're in a place like that. When I lived in Australia, I didn't notice. I didn't feel far from everything. But when you're amongst it all, you feel a different vibe if you're physically in San Francisco or in London, that, you know, you do meet people down the street that actually do work at major tech companies, and it's helpful. It's really nice to be there.
So, you know, you've been, I guess, super busy starting up Emojipedia and what's happening, and like I say, you're covering sort of multiple time zones. Like, how do you stay on top of all that with all of the changes and how people are using them, and like new channels that things are popping up, like your Apple Watch and my Apple Watch, which now I finally have somebody to send these emojis to.
Yeah,
fantastic. My wife stopped me doing it, but now I'll send them to you.
The animated ones, you can make his frown go up and down.
Sounds good. So, but like, how do you stay on top of all of that?
Honestly, I go for the do it now approach, which doesn't scale infinitely. That, you know, I'm a big fan of just getting things done quickly. If something comes up and if I can do it, I'll just do it today. I put things in my future calendar nonstop, where future me will see next week. You know, you wake up and you go, oh, okay, that's what I said I'd do last week. But yeah, honestly, there's a scalability factor to this, and at some stage you just need to either give up a responsibility or find another way to manage it, because I don't have the answers. Half my friends that do time tracking and spend their life trying to manage these things, looks painful to me.
I love that. The idea of just get it done. That totally works for me. Yeah. The amount of times that I say future me will work that out, you know, it really is you know, I keep pushing it further and further out, but we'll work it out at some point, I'm sure. And we always sort of like to sort of end with this one in terms of what we're doing. So what's the sort of one rule that you live by in terms of your day-to-day existence?
Day-to-day, I guess I'd go for a bit of short-term pain, long-term gain. Just like spend the time that it takes to set something up, whatever it is. If I'm going to a new company to do something, part of the reason I like sort of digital banking and this sort of thing, I always think that I'm going to be somewhere else. I always think, like, rather than go, I'll just get a local bank and I'll deal with it later, I'll try and shop around for something, even if it doesn't affect me day to day. So it's always trying to get more done now to save me later.
Nice. No gain without the pain, right?
I guess so.
Perfect. So Jeremy, thank you very much for coming in. I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to us.